Joining me today is Katie Emmitt. Hi, Katie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Good. Do you want to introduce yourself to the listeners today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Katie. I am a psychic advisor and an energy healer, and I'm currently living in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Awesome. Cool. Um, so the reason Katie is here today is because I just started following her on the Instagram and she does she is so cool. I just remember the other day I got to join one of her intuitive honing tests to see if we could pick the whatever you were holding or whatever you had chosen out of the 4 or 5 stones that were there. And that was so cool. So I was like, it would be really interesting to have her on the podcast. So tell us how you got here. Like, what is your background? How did you get to this?
Yeah, well, it's been a long journey, my whole 20s. So I went to college for fine art. I was a painting major. And out of college, I did a lot of random things. I used to have a business making and selling hula hoops and teaching hula hoop dance. And
Yeah.
yeah. And then I worked at a wine and paint art studio. I managed that for a couple of years. Um, but really, it was more of like this internal journey that kind of got me to where I'm at now. So in my early 20s, I was in kind of an abusive, not kind of, I was in an abusive relationship. And when I left that, there was just so much healing I needed to do and like things I needed to face and unlearn and sort of rewire my brain and all this stuff. So I went through this very intense period of, having a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of OCD, and just trying to kind of make sense of who I was again. And through that, I ended up connecting with a psychic medium, and she was also a counselor, and so I was working with her a lot. And she sort of helped me understand, like, oh, actually, okay, you're not just sensitive as people always say it, you're intuitive and you have psychic gifts, and you're an empath. And so that was like really eye-opening for me. I was like, okay, so there's like more here to this that I can explore. And I remember her just being like, do you know that you're intuitive or psychic or whatever? And I was like, no. but anyway, that sort of like started this whole like kind of snowball effect. Then my grandfather passed away and I really wanted to be able to communicate with him. So I really started to dive into that a little bit more. Then I was getting energy work done. And at the time I was trying really hard to develop my intuition. And so I had made this like conscious choice to listen to the messages I was receiving, internally. And as I was getting this energy healing work done it was a Kundalini Reiki healing session, I got this message that was like, you need to be doing this for yourself all the time. And I was like, really? Like, I always thought Reiki was just something that everybody does. And it's like, all the hippies do it, whatever. I was so skeptical. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to like listen to this and do it. And so the woman that I had been going to for healing work was offering a course. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to take this course and see how it goes. And I took the first course and was like, oh my God, why have I not done this sooner? This feels so good to me. It's just like perfect. Yeah. It's exactly what I want to be doing. So I went through, I did other levels with her. There's different types of Reiki, which we can talk about later if you want to, but I did a Usui Reiki training, and then I ended up doing this multidimensional healing training with the psychic that I had mentioned previously. Basically, everything just sort of fell into place. I ended up quitting my job at the art studio and doing this full time right before the pandemic started. And so that's how I've gotten to where I'm at now, doing this full time. Doing like coaching, psychic advising, energy healing, teaching energy work, teaching intuition development, all that kind of stuff.
That's so awesome. I say on my podcast a lot, like, if you had met me like 5 years, if you had asked me about this stuff, I'd have been like, nope, like, I don't know what this is. This doesn't make sense. to me. And then I don't know what happened. Like something kind of just like shifts in you where you're just like maybe your ego tells you that this doesn't make sense, but like your heart tells you it makes sense.
Yeah.
And so you're just like, I know this isn't supposed to make sense to me, but it does.
Yeah.
So I'm so sorry that you went through an abusive relationship. I feel like this is your silver lining though, like it's terrible that you had to go through that, but like do you feel like this is the thing, like you found your purpose, your path because of it? Or
Oh, for sure. I don't have any like I'm at the stage now with it where I can look back and go like, yeah, obviously that was like horrible and I don't excuse that behavior, but there was a role that that had in my life. There was obviously like I chose that subconsciously for whatever reason because of stuff from childhood. They've gone through all this stuff to the point where I'm like, okay, that was just something that needed to happen to push me on a certain path. And I think I probably would have ended up here regardless of whether that happened or not, but it might have taken longer. It might have taken a different route. I just don't know. But
totally.
Yeah. I don't have any like bad feelings about it or anything at this point. It's I've come to a place of like very deep acceptance with everything.
Yeah, totally. That's great. How do you know, like when you say intuitive, what does intuitive mean to you?
Yeah. I would say intuition is like being able to really listen to your internal voice and your internal, like really listening to your heart. And even some people will say sometimes kind of like listening to your gut, like kind of that gut instinct. But the thing is that like we have to also be really aware that we're not listening to ego or fear or anxiety, and that like we're actually like communicating with our soul and like our connection to everything. So what I typically explain to people about intuition is that it's like really deeply connecting with your soul and then communicating with I don't know, sort of like source energy. I like to think of it as kind of like a field of like everything that is. And so like when we can kind of connect with that, we can get answers for things. We can really tune into like what's right for us, what's not right for us, quote unquote good or bad situations, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because that is often the thing that I think about. Like I'll like feel some way about something and I can't really explain why I feel that way about it, and I start to question like, is this my ego communicating with me under the sort of veil of my intuition, or is this actually my intuition that's speaking to me? Is there like a general way of knowing which is which?
Oh yeah, this is like probably one of the most common questions I get as a teacher. So there's a lot of different ways to work on that and become aware of it. So what you mentioned was knowing something without knowing how you know it. That's like kind of the core of intuition. It's like, I don't necessarily know why I know this, but I just do. So like that's kind of like the core of it. But then when we want to start analyzing it and saying, okay, like, is this really intuition or is this something else? We want to pay attention to like the tone of the information or the message that we're getting. So something that's like fear-based or anxiety-based, is going to be like ruminating and very dramatic and intense and fearful tone. It might circle around like past or future scenarios. It's going to be very, like I said, dramatic or like it's the end of the world type of thing. Whereas our intuition is going to be very matter of fact and clear and straightforward. Even if it's like people always wonder, well, what about like your instinct that like tells you like get out of the way or something like that, or this is a bad scenario, bad situation to be in. It's still going to be straightforward and clear. Like you just need to leave and get out of here. And like, that's how it is. It's like, you need to leave. And then that's your answer, versus like fear is going to be like, you have to leave because this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and it like ruminates and it gets anxious and whatever. So the intuition is always going to be very clear and straightforward. It's going to be a calm tone, typically like reassuring, caring, supportive, that type of thing, versus our fear and our ego is typically going to be very like dramatic and ruminating and intense and like full of fear. So when you can start to kind of notice the difference in the tone, that helps. The other thing that helps too is just being very, very conscious of your own internal biases, your own fears, your own anxieties, your own projections, stuff you've gone through with childhood, how you've been raised. Like, so when you really know yourself on a deeper level and you ask a question intuitively, you can begin to go, okay, I think that this is actually not intuition because I'm noticing the tone is a little off, and this actually sparks something within me that ignites like a fear from childhood, or maybe it's a projection or something like that. And then you can start to reevaluate and go, okay, I don't think that was necessarily intuition, so let me like kind of take a step back and try again. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. I actually did an episode like a few episodes back about the ego and just like what that is and like how to have a relationship with your ego where you're just like really aware of it. Because it's tricky. It makes you think that you are that, but you're not. It's completely separate from you, and you is the intuitive part of you. You can listen to that part of you while also separating yourself from the ego. But that's so hard because you have to really work on being aware. I call mine Carla. Nicola Pera, the holistic psychologist, she says in her book, the first thing you should do is like name it. So that's what I did. Carla. Yeah. Yeah, I think is your feeling about intuition that our society essentially tells us to that's not trustworthy, that shouldn't be something we listen to?
Yeah, I think it's definitely like a cultural thing. So there's just certain cultures where that is encouraged, like from childhood, and it's it's just kind of a natural part of the culture and the day-to-day life. But I think for a lot of people, especially those of us who like grew up in America and just have kind of a typical westernized, like we were socialized this way and brought up this way, it's not something that we're encouraged to look at, because I don't know, for whatever reason, it's kind of seen as being like, you're weird if you're psychic, or you're, abnormal, out of the box. Or I think there's also some of it too that's kind of like maybe trying to steer people away from their internal compass and more into like, oh, well, you have to rely on like the facts and like this and that and have all the proof and stuff. But there's a lot of things that like necessarily can't be proven that we just deeply feel are true. And it's kind of like, when I think about it a lot, it's like, it's kind of this, I guess I feel that intuition and kind of that intuitive like feeling into things is more of like a feminine energy, and not necessarily like male female or anything like that with gender, but like more of like a flowing feminine yin, like receiving negatively charged type of energy, versus like more of like a masculine energy that's more like, these are the facts and we're going to go do things and we're going to like make it happen and have more structure. And that's kind of what we're typically brought up in, versus being more sensitive and feeling into things and letting things flow.
Yeah, I do feel like we live in a society that's like, you should make decisions based on facts. And I don't know, I feel like every time I've listened to my intuition, it has led me in really great ways, and I can't explain it. Like I can't like even the way I chose the car that I drive, that car was the car for me. I can't explain why. And she's been a great car. So I think I've been reading a lot of like Alan Watts and Pema Chodron recently, and I'm just like, we cling to these things that make us feel comfortable,
For
and
sure.
our intuition, because we can't explain it, makes us feel uncomfortable. So of
Yeah.
course we would lean towards something that could give us some kind of stability, and intuition
Absolutely.
doesn't unless you trust yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
Are there like certain experiences you've had in your life that have really like shown you, yes, I can trust my intuition?
Oh, I mean, at this point, it's too many to count, so that's that's why I
Yeah.
do what I
Are
do.
there like, what are your top three, or what is your top
Mm.
top one?
Well, so I don't know if I could say like a top one. It's just a lot. Well, maybe the top one is just like I said, making that conscious choice to honor it, and then getting that message about practicing energy work, and that has
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
put me on the path I'm on now. So I would say that's a big
Mhm.
one. But for me, when I chose to start living my life more intuitively, it was just a lot of little things that sort of added up to allow me to trust more deeply. Not necessarily any type of big events or
Right.
anything like that. It was just the day-to-day stuff of like, listening to my body about what does it want to eat,
Mhm.
listening to my body about how much like water it needs or what supplements it needs or what clothes do I want to wear to this thing,
Mhm.
or who do I like become friends with, how do I like pick up on their energy and how I interact with them. um like just all kinds of like little tiny things. And then especially in becoming an energy healing practitioner, I utilize my intuition like every session that I have. So the more that I did that, and the more I honored the messages I got there and then relayed them to my clients and listened to my intuition about where to work or what needed to be done energetically and all that kind of stuff, it provided better outcomes for my clients, and then they were resonating with it and they were giving me good feedback about that. So it was just kind of a lot of little things snowballing into a big thing. And
Yeah.
that's not to say that years later I'm not like, I still have moments where I question it or where it feels foggy or where I wonder about it or anything like that. And I think that's, pretty natural. Your ego always tries to just kind of get in and be like, don't forget
Yeah.
about me.
Yeah, like,
but
yeah.
but yeah, I think it's not necessarily these like really big things. It's more just
Mhm.
lots of little stuff over time that's allowed me to really trust.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, that's good to know, because I do feel like it's like baby steps too, because if you've never
Yes.
listened to your intuition, then you probably aren't completely trustworthy of it from the get-go. So, like getting trust with like gaining trust with a person, it takes time
Mm-hmm.
to work on that. And they may let you
Yeah.
down sometimes, but that doesn't mean you just give up on the trust building. How
Exactly.
how did you know you were psychic? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah. So okay. So intuition and being psychic are similar, but not quite the same. So intuition is, like I said, it's kind of that act of knowing without knowing, or like knowing without knowing why. So your intuition is what allows you to receive information from source or spirit or your soul or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then being psychic is being able to really like make sense of that, and figure out how to communicate it and figure out what the messages mean and all that kind of stuff. So basically they're pretty similar, like kind of right next to each other, but psychic is just like kind of how you make sense of the information that you receive intuitively. So there's different ways that you can take in information and make sense of it, and those are called psychic clairs. So it's kind of like your psychic senses. So just like we have physical senses like touch, taste, smell, sight, hearing, whatever, we have psychic ones, that we use to make sense of the intuitive information that we receive. But going back to what your actual question was, which was how did I know? Um, so like I've always been super sensitive, but didn't have like a understanding of why or what that meant or anything like that. And I can think of a few times throughout my life where I knew things without knowing how I knew them and different stuff like that, but I didn't know how to make sense of anything like that. When I
Yeah.
started to work with the medium that I mentioned, she basically, we did a session together, and I was in a really rough place, and she was like, let's do some guided exercises. And so she guided me through like connecting with my soul and beginning to connect with like spirit guides, so like any beings that I could begin to talk with, sort of quote unquote on the other side. Not, I don't like to think of it that way, but you know what I mean, like just any kind of energies that I could connect with. And I was very visually like seeing these energies and these beings and able to communicate and receive these messages and all this stuff. And she was like, do you know that you're like psychic or that you have any of these abilities? And I was like, no. What? I was like, doesn't everybody just have an easy time with this? And she was like, no, like not most people don't have that easy of a time with it. And I was like, oh, okay. And so that sort of getting that feedback from somebody who's been doing this for so long was like, oh shit, like maybe I could like develop this and work on it, and there's something there. And so that like really inspired me. I was like, I want to be like her, like be a psychic and everything. So that was kind of like, I guess how I like quote unquote knew. But when I look back, I can think like I've always been so sensitive and like picked up on energies and vibes and different things like that my whole life. I can think of one random time where I was like 15 and my boyfriend at the time said he was going to leave his mom's house and like walk somewhere. And I had like a total mental breakdown and like crying and freaking out because I was like, something bad is going to happen to him. Finally, he didn't go. And then we found out that a kid about his age walking on the road that he would have been walking on got hit by a car, like literally like 15 or 20 minutes after we had said he was going to leave. And so that was kind of like, I that sticks out in my memory pretty strongly because I was like, how the hell did like, I like, you know, I don't know what that was. I don't know if that was some like weird timeline thing where it could have been him, or if it was just me tuning into that area of where he would be walking or whatever that was. But like a couple of random weird things like that. My friend always had like ghosts in her house and we'd pick up on those and like, you know, just stuff like that. But
totally. That's such an interesting thing. Hey, random question. What is your sign?
So I'm an Aquarius sun, a Pisces moon, Sagittarius rising. Okay. Most of my chart is like Aquarius and Capricorn though.
Okay. I was gonna ask, I was like, I'm a water sign, and anytime I meet like people with either water sign risings or water sign moons, they tend to be like super, they know. I don't know how they know, but they know. I don't know what's with water and air signs, but like they got it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely like a water sign thing. Like that Pisces moon for sure like helps me out with all this stuff. And then I have Pluto and Scorpio, and so that like aspects my moon and all this stuff. So I definitely think that all that the Aquarius is like, okay, you're cool with doing whatever weird out of the box stuff, and then the Pisces and the Scorpio is like, all right, cool, like let's
here's your emotions. Yeah, for sure. Have you ever gotten into like numerology at all?
I guess I've looked that up. So yeah, a little bit. I can't remember my life path. I think it's 3 is my life path number. But I do like to look up numerology because, and this is something that I usually recommend to people, is like start paying attention to stuff that's happening in the world around you as like, you know, signs. And then Googling what those things mean. So like numbers are a big thing that come up for people, like repeating numbers, or even you can look up like your house number or your phone number or whatever and see what those things mean. So yeah, I am a little bit into that. I don't know a ton, but a little bit.
Yeah, I always found that interesting. It's funny because I don't think anybody else in my family is like really into astrology at all, but I am, but I'm also a water sign. So I feel like, I don't know if it's like water signs who are super into astrology, but I am. And my aunt is super into astrology too, which I just found out. And she's also into numerology too. And we have the same life path number.
Oh, that's cool.
And I was like, she's way older than me. But yeah, we're both 9, which apparently means like we're on the, we already know So now we have to like figure out how to like work it out while we're still here. And I was like, that's a lot of pressure. I don't know if I could handle that.
I think
Um,
I think the three that if I remember correctly, is something about like artists or creatives or something like
hmm,
that. If I remember
that's
correctly,
cool.
which
Yeah,
does kind of make sense.
I just fell down the rabbit hole of like any kind of information I could absorb as a way of like understanding myself and
Mm-hmm.
like human design. I fell down that rabbit hole too, and I was just like,
Yeah.
oh, this is informative too. But like intuition is hard because I guess you need evidence in your own life that you can trust it. And I think we just have a really hard time trusting ourselves. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. I quit my job recently. I don't have another job lined up. But a week after I quit my job, they closed the location I worked at.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And so I was just like, and a bunch of people above me got fired. So I was just
Hmm.
like, is this my intuition telling me that I need to get out of this?
Yeah, maybe for sure.
Or am I just really, what's the word? I do things very on a whim where I'm like, this
Hmm.
doesn't feel right. I have to get out of this like right now. I have to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but can I trust that? You know?
I mean, when you said that to me, my first thought was like, yeah, you're probably feeling the energy of what was coming up, and so you're like, I'm gonna just nip this in the butt right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know, but every time I can feel the people around me whenever I do stuff like that, I can feel their judgment. I can feel them being like, Hannah's being irresponsible. But also, I know that like every time I leave something, I make room for whatever else is supposed to be coming. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like if
for
I were to
sure.
cling to that job, what were the consequences of that? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, so, well, a couple of things. Well, one is just to circle back to what we were talking about as far as culturally, like ignoring our intuition and stuff. I think a lot of people do push down their intuition and what they're kind of even what they're feeling in their gut because they want to be polite or they want to be people
Mhm.
pleasing or
Yeah.
whatever. And so that's a big thing too. So when you can be in like a situation that's not so good and then you're just like, oh, I think because I don't want to be judged or because I want to be polite or I want to be nice, I'm just going to like sit through it even though everything is telling me to like get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing too. But um, as far as trusting it goes, there's a couple things that I recommend to my students typically. One is to just start making small decisions every day based on your intuition instead of based on like logic or fact.
Mhm.
Um, and then see how that goes for you. And just small like day-to-day stuff like what you eat or what you wear or how the order of that you do things or where you go, who you talk to, stuff like that. And then just see how your day plays out when you make decisions from an intuitive place versus a logic place. The other thing that I recommend is that when you do make slightly larger decisions, like based on your intuition and what you're really feeling into, like keep a journal or notes in your phone or something on your
Mhm.
computer and go, okay, I made this decision based on how I felt and my intuition. Um, I don't necessarily know why, or maybe you do know why, and you're sort of going on a feeling, whatever it is. Write down all the information about it, all the details, and then come back to it and see how it played out. Like, did it work or
Yeah.
did it not work out? If it didn't work, notice, okay, was I really tapping into my intuition there, or was this like a learning experience, or is there something that was like fear based that I was feeding into, and just kind of evaluating because the more that you kind of write stuff down and you can kind of go back and see
Yeah.
what's working, what's not. That helps a lot with giving you like evidence, to like trust it a little bit more. And I always encourage like my energy healing students to do that too with their sessions, because it's like when you can go back, like your brain is always going to think about like the one time that you failed versus like all the other times that you actually like got something spot on or worked out for you, or it created a really positive outcome. So like just keeping track of things more helps a lot with building that trust and having like evidence kind of, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think journaling is great all the time because you just have like you have something to refer back to. Like, how did this go last time?
Yeah.
I knew this girl that I used to coach who every time she like made a mistake, she would go back in her journal and find the time she made that same mistake before and see what she did then. And I'm like, that is so cool that you were even aware of doing this. Like,
Yeah.
you have this to refer back to. Okay, intuition. I just think that, okay, tell me more about the clairs, because I didn't realize, I know there's clairvoyant, but what are the other different types of clairs?
Yeah. Clairvoyance is the one that everybody knows about, but isn't actually as common as people would think. So the most common one that most people experience the easiest, well, there's two. One is clairsentience, which means clear sensing or clear feeling. So anybody who's like sensitive or an empath or like sort of feels things in their body or feels into emotions or energy, they're going to experience clairsentience. So if you're like, oh, I just like felt that this was the right choice for me, or I felt in my body that this was a good decision to make, or I felt something in my body that told me this or whatever. So like really feeling, that's clairsentience. Claircognizance is the other really common one, and that is clear knowing. So that's like when you just sort of receive a message or an answer or a solution to a problem or something just dropping into your head, and you're like, I don't really know how I know this, but it just came to me and I just knew it. So clairsentience and claircognizance are the most common ones that people will experience. Then there's clairvoyance, which most people know about but don't have as often, and that's clear sight. So a lot of people think that this is really about like seeing with your physical eyeballs, like, okay, I like look at you with my physical eyes and I see your aura or I see ghosts or whatever. And like some people it is that physical for them, but for most people it's more about like using your mind's eye. So like closing your eyes, visualizing in your mind, even almost like daydreaming kind of. It feels similar to daydreaming. So that's clairvoyance. The really weird ones, oh, I guess clairaudience is not a weird one. There's a couple of weird ones. So clairaudience is another one that not as many people will experience, but it's basically clear hearing. So if you hear, this could be internally, like in your head, or externally, like actual physical sound, messages or frequencies or things like that. It's like buzzing in one of your ears if you have that with no explanation for why, or like a ringing, different pitches and different ears. That's how it most commonly manifests. But people might also hear like, I don't know, spirits communicating with them or whatever. It's more of like a physical thing. And then,
so you're saying that with that one, you could be like in a situation and all of a sudden you just get like a ringing in your ear, and that could be like, oh, weird. I just thought that was random. Yeah.
So, I mean, it can be. And obviously there's like, is it called tinnitus, where your ears ring all the time and stuff? Yeah. Like, so there are like medical explanations for certain things, but if you know you don't have that and it's just kind of a random thing, or it tends to happen for a few seconds at certain situations or whatever, you can begin, or it's happening a lot, but you know that you don't have any medical issues, like that could be a potential reason why. And the left and right ears mean different things. Like, so it's said that, I believe it's the right ear means external shifts and changes. So that might be like spirits around you or energies around you or something like that. And then left, and I'm not like 100% certain on this, and maybe like 90% certain on this, it might be reversed. Left would be internal shifts. So like if there's something internally going on within you, within your energy field or your soul, you would maybe hear ringing or a buzzing or something. And then they also will say like that different pitches mean different things too. But I don't know off the top of my head what those are. Like a high pitch would be different than like a low pitch sound and stuff like that. So you can kind of look up different like meanings for those things.
Do you think people that don't have vision or hearing are more prone to being any of the clairs?
So okay, so the other thing is there are two other ones that are not really common but can be experienced, just so that people, if they have these things, are like, oh, that's what it is. Yeah. Clairgustance and clairalience. So clairgustance is clear taste, and clairalience is clear smelling. So they usually go hand in hand, and these are really unusual, so a lot of people don't have them. That would be unexplained taste or smells that like would lead you to some kind of information. So some people might find that they like get a taste or a smell on somebody who has a disease or a certain ailment or something like that. There are like psychics that work in forensics that will get taste or smell for like different things to let them know how somebody died or where somebody died, or, you know, all the things that were wrong with the person, whatever. So those things do exist. Some people might like smell fragrance for no reason, and maybe that reminds them of somebody who's passed over, or, you know, different things like that. So there are those are less common, but they do come up. Most people will have some sort of like rough combination of several of these in an experience. So it's not necessarily just they're just clairvoyant or they're just claircognizant or something like that. So usually it sort of all kind of blends together. So like I know for myself personally, it's a big blend of lots of things. So I'll sense things and feel things in my body, and like emotionally that'll come up. And then I'll just sort of know or sort of receive knowledge or information intuitively. And then I might also see something to get more information about it. So I'll be able to visualize it in my mind. And those are kind of the main ones that I utilize. So for most people, it's going to be some kind of blend of those. None of them are better than others or anything like that. A lot of my students mostly rely on clairsentience and claircognizance, and they can do literally anything that somebody else who has different set of clairs that, like, you know, that they typically work with. So there's no like hierarchy of it or one more useful than the other. It's just how you work with them and what comes more easily for you.
Awesome. Yeah, I think just even sharing this information is helpful, because I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who have like experienced these things and they just don't know what they are.
Yeah,
and they're just like, why does this feel like I feel something and I don't know why I feel this, and I don't know anybody else that feels this. So like, yeah. So that's cool. Thanks for sharing that. Where did I want to go after this? Oh, Reiki. I did want to talk about Reiki. How did you end up there?
Well, like I said, I was getting energy work done, and was like enjoying it. I was having some pretty intense experiences. Basically, I was going to get energy work done because I was kind of at like a point where I knew I had a lot more healing that I needed to do, but I just wasn't sure what came next or how to approach it. Therapy wasn't quite like getting there, and I was just like, okay, I'm just going to try a bunch of different things and see what works.
Yeah.
At the time, I just really felt, at that time when I was doing that, I felt that I had a lot of like residual like physical trauma stored in my body that I just didn't know how to move, and so I was hoping that the energy work would help with that. And it did, but honestly, I ended up learning a lot of other techniques that did help with moving that energy like much later. But regardless, I started getting energy work done. I was having some very intense sessions. I was having a lot of different physical sensations during the healings. I would twitch. I would have, my muscles would spasm. My organs were like spasming and twitching. I would get chills, hot or cold, changes in pressure, all this kind of stuff. And anyway, it felt like it was doing something for me. And then that was when I got that message of like, you need to be doing this all the time for yourself. And so that's when I started taking these courses. And then it just sort of snowballed. And like I said, it wasn't something that I thought I would ever do or that I ever saw myself doing, but I'm glad that I listened to it and was just like, okay, let's see what happens. Because it just it came really naturally for me. It felt right. I was very inspired by it and excited by it. Like I hadn't been about anything in a really long time. And so it all just sort of fell into place after that. Until where I was like, okay, this is really having a positive effect on me. I want to practice it on other people and help them. And then it really turned into, I want to like teach people how to do this for themselves. And so now I'm doing a lot of teaching and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Tell us, for the listeners who don't know what Reiki is, what is Reiki besides just being like a healing practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So Reiki is a Japanese term, and it basically represents earth energy and heaven or spirit energy. So the idea with Reiki is that you are channeling, so you're sort of like a clear open channel. You're calling in earth and spirit energy and then allowing it to flow through you, either flow through you for yourself healing or flow through you and into another person for healing somebody else. So at its core, like that's what it is. There's a lot of different lineages or like types of Reiki. Like I said, Reiki is a Japanese term. It basically started by, people have been doing energy work for like literally since the dawn of time. Early 1900s, this man, Dr. Usui, which I don't think he was actually a doctor, so a lot of people just call him Sensei Usui. He was like, okay, I want to find a way to work with energy healing that can be worked on by like the masses and is easy to explain to people and teach and practice and whatever. And so he sort of rediscovered this way of working with earth and spirit energy and created Usui Reiki, which is kind of the traditional like Japanese Reiki. So that spreads, comes to the West, spreads, and then ends up getting very kind of like diluted, as those things often do. And the kind of traditional Japanese way of working is very different from the kind of westernized way of working. All these other types of Reiki are created. So that's what Kundalini Reiki is. It's not connected to Kundalini Yoga or anything like that. It's a man, Ole Gabrielsen, who lives in Denmark, created Kundalini Reiki and some other different types of Reiki. I think it's like one gold Reiki, copper Reiki. I don't know. There's a bunch of different kinds.
I was like,
so Kundalini Reiki is one of his things he's created. Now with Kundalini Reiki, the idea is that not only are you working with earth and spirit energy, you're also working with and activating your own Kundalini energy, which is like basically your own life force energy. And when you work on somebody else, you're also activating their life force energy as well. So instead of just those external energies, it's also the internal life force energy of each person is activated. So that's the primary difference. Does that answer your question? I could talk about this stuff all day. There's a lot to it, but
here's a more specific question about Reiki. Your chakras and your energy channels, like what are those?
So chakras, like that traditionally, that's a tantric yoga tradition, right? So it's South Asian, and they have had this philosophy around for like thousands and thousands of years. So this is like very, very ancient. But the idea is that we have a lot of little nadis, so like little tiny points of energy, little channels throughout the entire body. And where those come together, we have a chakra. So in those areas where there's a lot of energy coming together, that creates a chakra. Way back when, and I guess still like today, in tantric traditions, depending on the like lineage of Tantra you're practicing, your teacher, like several different factors, you're going to learn about different energetic systems, just dependent on that. So in the West, we're really familiar with this like 7 chakra system, like root to crown kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that was actually sort of adapted from this like treaty or something, like a government document, and like loosely translated, and then New Age people in the West sort of like ran with it and create all these associations and whatever. So traditionally in like in Tantra, the chakras were used more as like a prescriptive, I don't know, way of healing the body. So like your guru, your teacher would say, okay, you're going to focus on this very specific particular point in your body. Like maybe it's your spleen or something, like a little energy spot there. You're going to visualize this particular flower or mandala or something. And then I'm going to give you a chant or like a syllable or something to do to activate it. And then you're going to do this breath work and these poses. And then this is going to like bring you a specific type of healing. So it's like prescriptive like that. The only associations that they really had, like, so now we like a lot of times in Western culture we're talking about like, oh, root chakra means physical safety and physical health and like related to sex and like, all that, the color red and like whatever. They didn't really have those associations. It was more like they would have different associations with earth elements like earth, air, spirit, water, whatever. But they didn't really have those same type of associations. It was more just like, you're going to focus on this area to bring healing to your body and that kind of thing. And actually, traditionally in Japanese Reiki, they don't use chakras at all. They use an energy system that is focused on the hara, which is like your life force energies in your abdomen. So there's a lot to all of this because and it's a lot of like blending of cultures and things overlapping and whatever. But to put it simply, a chakra is simply an area of your body where there are a lot of energy channels coalescing into one location. It's like an intersection of a lot of channels, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I've like I did like some research on like Ayurveda and all that, and they talk a lot about the chakras too. And I know like a lot of astrologists who will say that if you're feeling like sick in your throat or whatever, that means that your throat chakra is blocked and that you need to do something. And I'm like, this is more complicated than I thought it was. Everything means something else, and I don't know what these things mean.
Well, so here's where intuition really comes in, and this is what I talk about with my students a lot. Like I said, traditionally, there were not all these different associations. This is a really like recent thing, like within the last 60 years.
Yeah.
So what I typically encourage my students to do is not think about like, oh, my throat hurts, my chakra's blocked, I have to do something for my throat or whatever. But to instead like think about if there's stagnant energy or something isn't moving the way it is, or you have like it should be, or there's a physical ailment or pain or something like that, that's like your body communicating to you that there's something going on there. So like don't think of it so much as like a block, think about it as like communication, like, hey, pay attention to this spot. The other thing that I also talk to my students about is like, you don't have to remember, like, I don't really think there's a point to remembering all these associations because I honestly think that it's changeable based on who you are and where you're at in your life and all that kind of stuff. So that's where it's more like you want to pay attention to your intuitions. Like, for example, like the example of the throat you gave, let's say your throat hurts or it feels clogged up or blocked in some way and you feel like something's not quite right there. Like, taking time to meditate and connect with your body and ask your body, what is this? Why is it here? And what can I do to support you to heal this is going to be way more valuable than Googling what's the energetic meaning of my throat being blocked or whatever. Because really what I encourage people to do is focus more on their internal compass and their intuition, because they're going to like learn a lot more that way, because not everything is the same for every person. It's like so unique to you because energy is so changeable and it's unseen and all that kind of stuff.
I totally agree. I think like I come from like a nutrition, like psychology background, and so I often like tell, like I've been a health coach for a while now, and like one of the things I often tell people is like our bodies are so smart. Like their last resort is to show you in a physical way that something is going on. So like I've been getting a lot of like shoulder, like I'm pretty sure I have like shoulder bursitis, and whenever it acts up, I'm just like, it hurts. What can I do for like the physical pain? And I'm like, Hannah, it's not this is the last resort. What's actually going on here? I mean, it could be actually a physical thing. Like maybe I bumped into something, but I'm pretty sure it's like something else I'm not dealing with. And my body is like, hey, look at this. What's going on here? You know?
Yep.
Yeah, they're super smart, but we live in a culture that likes to treat things for their physical, like, oh, I have a headache, let me just
treating the symptoms and not the root cause.
What's the root here? There's something else. And then, you know, later down the line they get really ill and they're like, what happened? And I'm like, well, you were ignoring all of the signs your body has been trying to tell you. Okay, so the last question I have is, what is multidimensional healing? I'm so curious. Yeah.
So this is actually a energy healing modality that the medium I mentioned developed herself. So to reel back just a second, I did mention how it's possible to create your own energy healing systems, and plenty of people do it all the time. And so this is something that she created, and basically it's just another way of working with energy. In multidimensional healing, we are focusing on healing the mind, body, and soul all together, and healing through like not just the physical reality, but also like all these layers of energy and sort of dimensional realities, like, you know, maybe past lives or other layers of energy like our aura and stuff like that. So it's sort of like a more, I don't know how to put it, like
holistic.
It just goes a little bit deeper. It's like instead of just addressing like the physical body, we're gonna like really dive into what it is.
Cool.
And truthfully, what I do now is kind of a combination of like a lot of the different things that I've learned, and then also just my own practices. So I don't typically explain that I do Reiki, even though it's easiest for me to just say I practice Reiki, because even though not a lot of people know what that is, more people know what Reiki is. But what I typically do now in my sessions for myself and for other people is I'm really working with my intuition and my psychic abilities to sort of scan and see what's going on and work with what I'm being shown intuitively. So every single session that I do is totally different, just based on what the person has going on. And it's just kind of a blend of a lot of different things, which I know sounds super vague.
Yeah, but I get it. Like, you have so many different skill sets and like ways of understanding a person and helping them. It's hard to put just one word to it. Yeah. But isn't that better than just having one word, you know?
Yeah, I think the problem is when I try to explain to people what I do, it's like,
they're like,
I don't really know what I do anymore.
Do you have 20 minutes? Because like, yeah, I get it. Yeah, but that's great. I mean, I think what you're doing is great. It's better, at least you're really clear. I think you have an intention that's very clear. The intention is the most important part, right?
Yeah, yes, it is. And I think what I really try to do is just address each person's individual needs instead of just doing the same thing for everybody. And that's what has proven to work really well. Like, especially when I teach, that's what I encourage people to do, is utilize their intuition and work with each person on a case-by-case basis that they're working on, because everyone is different, everyone has different needs, everyone has different backgrounds, different energy levels, all that kind of stuff. So doing the same exact thing for each person is just not going to really cut it, you know, like some people it's going to work really well for them and other people it's not. So when I teach, I don't necessarily teach about like, let's balance all the chakras or something, because that's not what everybody needs. Or let me just like clear everything out, because it's not necessarily what everybody needs, you know? So I try to really encourage my students to focus on their intuition and working based on what they're being shown, what they're feeling into, and what they know intuitively, and letting that inform the energy work that they do.
That's awesome. That's like super powerful too, because you can't get any more personalized than that. Yeah, you're like meeting those people where they're at. You know, that's great. Yeah, because I've you know, there's nothing worse than somebody coming at you with something that was like constructed for every other person before you, and you're just like, this isn't gonna work for me because this feels like it was made for not me. It was made for, I don't know, a robot or something, you know, not like I'm a person. Yeah. Cool. Well, is there anything else you'd like to discuss while we're here together?
No.
Do you think there's something that's misunderstood about, because I'm with you, I do think after I've learned about myself the past few years, I realize that I am like a highly sensitive person and somewhat empathic. Do you think there's something that is misunderstood about people who follow their intuition who are more empathic than other people?
Well, I think it's more just like, well, I think in general, yeah, it's maybe not necessarily understood because it's not something that's like necessarily embraced in our culture. And so you do often end up being seen as like the weird one or the burden or something, or like people will internalize that and be like, oh God, like I'm a burden for this, or I'm too sensitive or whatever. And people tend to feel that being sensitive or being intuitive is a burden or a problem for them, and they're like, oh, I just want to go back to like, I just like don't want to feel anything anymore, I'm like so tired of it. Or people feel victimized by it. But I think the best thing that we can do is, like, for those of us who are really sensitive, learn how to work with it, think of it as a skill, and then become empowered by it. Instead of feeling victimized by it, or like it's a burden, or like you're a weirdo or something like that. So learning how to embrace these things as gifts instead of like shoving them down, ignoring them or whatever. I don't know if that's necessarily a misconception. I mean, I think there's a lot of other misconceptions too. Like, I think there's weird stuff that will start circling around like social media and the internet and stuff like that. Like, I saw something like a while back that was like, oh, like empaths and narcissists are like actually exactly the same. And I was like, no, that's definitely not the case.
No, like narcissists don't know they're narcissists. Empaths pretty much know they're empaths, you know?
Yeah. I think
we accidentally, like, you said you were in kind of an abusive relationship, and I'm pretty sure I just got out of like a 3-year off and on abusive relationship with them, like, who I believe to be a narcissist. And I think it's very easy for empaths to like accidentally question, like, am I a narcissist? Like, do you ever accidentally absorb other people's stuff, you know?
Yeah, especially like, if you're getting gaslit and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah.
I'm really big into like personal responsibility too. So like, I think that, you know, if people are feeling victimized by anything in their life, it's like, okay, that's the time where you got to look at like, why do you feel victimized by it, and how do you turn that around to feel more empowered by it, and you know, take your responsibility for, you know, whatever trauma you have, and be like, okay, well, I understand that I have that, and now I got to like work through it and heal it. I can't like blame it on everybody else or whatever. And I think some people get like a bad like idea of like what an empath is, because there's a lot of people who like self-identify as empaths and highly sensitive, and then they don't like work on empowering themselves through it, and
they just use that. They're just like, this is what I am, and I don't have to do anything else about it, because this is what I identify with. It doesn't mean I don't need to do work. This is just who I am. I get that. And
I think that maybe that's where that kind of like misconception of empaths and narcissists comes in, or something, where it's like, But it's really, I don't know. The biggest thing that I see is that because being intuitive and being sensitive is not valued in our culture very much, people feel isolated and like they're the odd ones out or they're weirdos or whatever, and that's kind of the biggest thing that I see playing out a lot of the time.
Totally. The last thing I want to mention, I was actually talking to my sister about this last night. I was thinking like social media is so strange because I think people, I'm just going to share this because I'm just going to share this. Like, I'm a super vulnerable, like, transparent person, so I just share whatever. But I also understand I'm a people pleaser, so, or recovering people pleaser. So sometimes oversharing is just my response to trauma that I've experienced.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's this whole thing going on social media where it's like hard to identify when someone is being authentic or not. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So complicated because now we have to like, my intuition knows when someone's not being authentic, but it just hurts that this person thinks that they have to pretend to be this when they're not being themselves, you know? Do you ever feel pressured to be somebody you're not on the social media?
Yeah, and I think I used to feel that way a lot more than I do now. A big thing for me was, like, I also understand that I'm recovering people pleaser, that I have, like, different things that happened through my childhood that have led me to want to be liked and want me to, like you were talking about, oversharing because it feels comfortable or oversharing as a response to something or to try and trauma bond with somebody right away and have a deeper connection and stuff like that, versus just letting things sort of naturally play out the way they need to. So my biggest thing, and I've been working on this the last year, is I think about, why am I posting what I'm posting? Is this fitting into like sort of cycle of either victimhood or trying to rescue and save people or something like that? Like, does it fall into that category, or is this like genuine and authentic for me to share because I feel like I want to share it? Or am I sharing something because I want to over explain myself because I want to be understood more or something? Or is it something that I genuinely want to share and it feels good in my soul to do so? So I've just been focusing on that for myself in terms of what I share online and what I feel comfortable with. I used to share a lot about the abusive relationship that I went through, and I don't anymore because it comes from a place of like victimhood and over explaining, like, I'm this way because I went through this, and I'm not this way because I went through this. I'm this way because I am who I am and stuff. So it's definitely shifted what I put out into the world. I think inevitably with social media, especially if you have a business on social media, you do have a filter, because if you have a business, it's like, I'm the front of the business and like, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of different like complexities and layers to it, but I just try to think about for myself, is this authentic and true for me? And where is the reason that I'm sharing this? Is this to educate? Is it because I want to rescue or save somebody, which then I'm not going to do that? Is it because I want to play out like a victimhood role or get sympathy? Then I'm not going to do that. Is this because it just feels good to like get off my chest and like be accepting of it? Then okay, I'm going to do that. Does this feel really good within my body and my soul? Yeah, okay, then I'm going to do that. So I just focus on that for myself. And then try not to worry about what other people are, if they're doing that or not.
Yeah, because like I'm such a blip. Like you have like a bajillion followers, but like I'm just a blip. But what's interesting is like I lose followers every week, but then I like gain the followers.
Yeah, I do too.
And I'm just like, all right, well, at least people don't like me enough to leave, and like people like me enough to join back. So, but like the people pleaser in me is like, Hannah, don't look at this data. Like, stop looking at this. It's not good for my mental health.
Well, from a social media marketing standpoint, you have to think about it as like, okay, the people who are leaving were not going to be clients or customers or loyal followers or loyal listeners in your case for your podcast or anything like that. So that's okay. We let them go. And then what we end up with is a more concentrated following or community of people who are going to be engaged and really enjoy what I do. So I try to think about it like that. Like, let the dead weight fall off, and then the people who are generally here, like, that's good. But I get it, because, like, yeah, I lose followers all the time, and often I'll go through phases where I am losing more than I'm gaining, and I went through that for a long, long time, and now it's finally sort of shifting with reels and all this kind of stuff. It's shifting the other direction, but I also pivoted my Instagram multiple times, and that creates its own like weird situation as far as follower accounts go and stuff like that. But really, like, followers is more of like a vanity metric. It's more about like the engagement that you get.
It's really, and reels, I don't know if it's because I'm like 33 and I just don't get it, but I'm just like, wait, what are reels? I don't.
I love to make them because
what do I do? I don't understand.
They're so fun. It's way
I like
to be
your reels. Yeah.
I like a way to be educational.
Stuff, or like, yeah.
I watch a lot so that I can get ideas, and then I have a little notes folder on my phone of ideas, and I save audios, and I use that for inspiration, and I save different ones for inspiration, and then I'll make them. But I really enjoy making them. I think they're fun. And right now they're really being prioritized. So people who are making them and posting them every day, or at least, 4 a week or something, are getting shown in the algorithm. So it's a really easy way to get new followers. Now we're really going off topic of the whole podcast.
No, it's totally, I totally get, but you run a business, and you're an intuitive person who runs a business based on your intuition. So I feel like this is important for people who are like, how can I get in this like healing industry while also running a business? It's tricky business. You know? Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for being here today. It was an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
It was great.
I'm actually, after our interview, I'm going to drop your links on the for the listeners to check you out on the internets and such. So thank you again so much for being here.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.